Okay, Assalamualaikum. Welcome everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to the APB webinar series for 2021, organized by the Academy of Language Studies, University Technology Mara, UiTM Negeri Sembilan, Kuala Pilah campus. I'm Dr. Rafida Kamaludin, your MC for today's webinar. Okay, our topic for today is adapting to the new normal, technologies in teaching and learning. Okay, in order to ensure everyone gets to experience our webinar comfortably, so I would like to make some gentle reminder and some housekeeping before we start. Okay, first of all, we are broadcasting today's session via two platforms, Cisco WebEx and also FB Live. Right? And if you have any queries, please type your questions in the chat box for WebEx and the comment section for FB Live. Right? And our moderator, Ms. Dzeelfa, will be attending to all the questions during the Q&A session. Okay, please kindly turn off your microphone and your camera throughout the session. And finally, the attendance link and QR code for your e-certificate will be provided at the end of this webinar. So for the UiTM staff, training hours will also be provided. So please do not forget to scan the QR code. Okay, so without further ado, I will hand over the session to our moderator, Ms. Dzeelfa Zainal.
Thank you, Dr. Rafida. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to everyone who has joined the session. I am Dzeelfa Zainal and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. It is an honor to welcome Associate Professor Dr. Kumar Laxman from the Faculty of Education, University of Auckland, New Zealand. Dr. Kumar, we are so glad you could be here today to share your insights on a topic entitled Adapting to the New Normal, Technologies in Teaching and Learning. Ladies and gentlemen, for your information, Associate Professor Dr. Kumar Laxman graduated with a PhD in Instructional Design and Technology from Macquarie University, Australia. His other qualifications include a master's degree in Educational Technology from the National Institute of Education, Singapore, a bachelor's degree in Civil Engineering from the National University of Singapore, and a postgraduate diploma in education from the National Institute of Education, Singapore. He has worked in various capacities, both as an educator and an instructional designer with many reputable educational organizations and tertiary institutions. Without further ado, I would like to welcome our speaker for today, Dr. Kumar Laxman. Dr. Kumar, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I don't know whether you can see me, my video, because it's a very gloomy day in Auckland.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah, we can see you very clearly and we can also hear you. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. All right. Can I just make sure before I start that all of y'all can see my slides?
Okay.
Can you see?
For now, no, not yet.
Oh,
not yet.
Okay, just hang on. Let me, yes.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. All right, it's on now.
Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure because I've done seminars before where I didn't realize that the screen is not being shared, and it doesn't make much difference because you're still talking about the points that you want to do, but it's nicer with obviously the screen, the PowerPoint slides. So yeah, thanks for the introduction. I mean, just to give a little bit of a context to the audience, based on my qualifications, you would have known that I'm born and raised in Singapore. So I'm not from New Zealand. I've been in New Zealand now for the last 9 years. Absolutely one of the most beautiful countries on earth. If you have not come here, I would strongly urge you to visit us. So I'm with the Faculty of Education at the University of Auckland with the School of Curriculum and Pedagogy. So my areas of teaching and research expertise lie in learning design and learning technologies. So that's what I do. My doctoral, my master's students are all in the area. So today I'm going to share something quite generic from the last decade or 15 years of research that has shown the role or the use of technology in teaching and learning in a very generic context, without going into specific technologies or without going into specific discipline domains. Just some, a basic understanding of the potential of technology, because there's a lot of hype that technology is an enabler in terms of teaching and learning, which it is. But then, we need to unpack it in terms of the challenges, the shortcomings, the pitfalls that are involved, because using a technology, any kind, the most recent cutting edge technology doesn't mean that it's going to bring about automatically the best of learning outcomes. So these are some of the things that we're going to look at. This is one of my favorite quotes, more than 15 years old, by Bates, but I think it still holds very true. Good teaching may overcome a poor choice of technology, but technology will never save bad teaching. So as far as educational technology is concerned, the basic premise is in education. Technology is just a vehicle, it's an enabler, as I said. So, if you're a good teacher, if you're a good instructor, if you're a good educator, even if you're choosing the wrong technology for your teaching, you can still, overcome it. But you may be using the most cutting edge technology, AR, VR, whatever, the electronic gamings, name whatever that might be out there, the most cutting edge. But if you have not invested enough time into your instructional planning, into your instructional implementation, then it's not going to bring about effective teaching outcomes. All right, so we need to remember that always. It's not about technology. Technology does make a difference. It can enhance your instructional delivery, but you have to know the basics of who your audience are, who your learners are, what are their strengths, what are their needs, what is the curriculum subject that you're teaching, how best it can be delivered. And you may not even use any technology. Sometimes you don't have to use a technology because that's the best way of teaching it. Then do not use a technology. Never use a technology for the sake of using it. Sometimes very simple technologies I've seen in third world countries where they may not have access to the most cutting edge of technologies, but yet with very simple technologies like PowerPoint, for example, you may think it's a very low form, but I've seen amazingly wonderful English literacy and numeracy classes having been taught with PowerPoint. So, technology is just one construct. That's what I want to emphasize throughout this seminar. So let's look at a little bit of a definition of what educational technology means. Nowadays, you have got different synonyms for it. Some people call it learning technologies. Some people call it ICT in education, but they all basically mean the same topics that we are looking at. So it is the study and ethical practice of facilitating teaching and learning by creating, using, and managing appropriate technological processes and resources. So I repeat that I like this definition because it's concise, it's the study, it's ethical, because, it's ethical in the sense that your technology must be accessible by everybody in your class. It should not be that the rich can access, sometimes certain complex newer technologies could be accessed by, say, the richer students, whereas the poorer students may not be able to access. That's not ethical. Or for example, in New Zealand, it's a very vast country. Quite a lot of our population are living in rural areas where internet connections may not be good, etc. So you need to be very aware of all those factors. So it has got to be an ethical application. It has to facilitate teaching and learning. So you're not using a technology because you just think, oh, it's cool, it's the latest gadget, it's the latest tool, so I'm going to use it in my teaching. No, it's your basic premise, as I said, is the teaching and learning. You got to know who your learners are, what your learning goals are, what are the learner styles are, what subject matter are you teaching it, and then you look at whether this technology can enhance or facilitate those teaching processes. And you need to create. You can either create or you can use existing ones, and you need to manage that process by using appropriate technological processes and resources. All right, this is Dale's cone. For those of y'all who may not have seen it, it's quite an interesting one. So Dale's cone of experience basically explains how the human mind or the human brain learns. You only remember 10% of what you read. You remember 20% of what you hear. You remember 30% of what you see, images, videos, whatever your eyes, can observe. 50% you can remember by hearing and seeing. 70% of what you write and you say, which is why nowadays, well, the last one is 90% of what they do. That means you demonstrate, you perform something, you model an experience, which is why nowadays in our learning, in terms of reforms in education, we are moving further and further down this cone so that more of our teaching encompasses the lower half of the cone, simply because that will enable students to remember and apply what they learn in a much better way. In the past, it used to be right at the top of the thing. The teacher used to just, the teacher, the lecturer, the educator used to just read, talk and talk and talk and talk. And, research, cognitive psychology research clearly shows that that's not the most effective way, which is why nowadays a lot of processes are student-centered, active learning. You got different names for it, inquiry-based learning, problem solving. There's just so many different strategies, but basically all of them, what they're trying to do is move the teaching and learning to the lower half of the cone. Right, so this is quite a succinct. I like Dale's cone because it basically tells you, what you need to be looking at. Having said that, the fact, what I want to point out is that even though we are moving more and more downwards, it doesn't mean that the top half is not important. For example, certain simple things like, let me tell you some things like the name of a building. All right, the name of a building. I want to point out to you that for example, if you come to Auckland, there's a very iconic building called the Sky Towers. And then we got a very famous bridge called the Harbour Bridge. For that, I just have to tell you, you don't, for some things, for certain information, much more lower level information, you don't have to go down to the bottom of Dale's cone. It doesn't mean that every time you teach or you tell your students something, you have to be looking at the lower half of the cone. Basically, what this cone tells you is that you look at what is it that you're teaching, who your learners are, and then you choose the appropriate strategy. Obviously, the more lower you go, the more higher order thinking, the more active learning that happens. But it doesn't mean that the top half of the cone is not important. Some things you just have to tell your students, some things they just have to hear from you. That's it. You don't have to simulate, or you don't have to design and perform something. All right. Okay. All right. So these are some of you might say strategies or processes you just bear in mind when you are trying to integrate technology in teaching and learning. What are the learning goals? Okay. What are the learning goals of the lesson? What is it that you want your learners to take away from your lesson? All right, what will be some of the effective strategies? And then once you are very clear with the goal and the strategies you're going to use to teach it, then you look at the technological tools. For example, you might think, I think, this topic on, on science, on voltages and resistance can be taught through problem solving by students actually doing some problems. So you might then look for, if you're looking at some technological supports, you look for certain simulations that allows students to problem solve by actively putting together the different components of a circuit. So I hope that gives a little, I mean, it's just a very basic example, but I hope that gives you the idea that first and foremost, you think about the learning goals and the learning strategies and who your learners are. And then you look at the tools, and then you see what is the affordance of the tool, and then you see whether there's a match. If there's a match, it's a great plan. Otherwise, you should discard the technology. I've seen a lot of teachers who use the most latest gadget, and you ask them why, why do you have to use such a complex technology platform? They say, oh, because it's really cool, it's the latest one. But does that mean that that will enhance teaching and learning? If not so, then you should not use it. The simpler the technology, you'll be surprised, the more profound is the learning impact. All right, so that's the summary of what I've described. All right, so now let's look at the last 10, 15 years of what is some of the research-based best practices in technology integration in teaching and learning. When properly integrated, technology can bring about positive learning outcomes. But as I said, it's not automatic. You need to have good planning, you need to do good design, you need to do good analysis before that happens. Lots of research studies have shown that by using the wrong technology, by using the mismatching technology with the lesson plan, actually learning has become impeded, learning has become slowed. In fact, it has created more problems. I've seen some teachers fumbling with the technology, students are anxious, students are frustrated, there's a delay, there's a lot of unhappiness, the learning never takes place. So, plan carefully, choose your technology appropriately. All right, so when you're looking at technologies, we can say that there are two levels of educational technology. The first one is drill and practice, which is basically just memorizing, rote learning. There are some technologies, particularly if you look at softwares that were created around the 2000s, early 2000s, late 1990s, when technology started coming into the educational system, you'll see a lot of them are drill and practice. Very simple. It's just like rote learning. You memorize and then you push out. So you will see a lot of programs will be like something like websites. You just go, you read some information, then they will have some multiple choice questions. So those are drill and practice programs. And then, over time now with advancement in technology, we've got more sophisticated educational tools, simulations, videos, modeling softwares that help you, collaborative learning tools, analytical thinking, digital tools. So there's a lot of tools out there, all right? So those are the two types that I told you just now. Type 1 application, drill and practice. Students basically learn from the technology. So you go and look at a website, information is given to you. Instead of the teacher presenting you with the information, the technology presents the information. Instead of the teacher testing you with paper multiple choice questions, the technology tests you. So basically it's low level, type 1 application. You learn from the technology. Okay. Type 2 is what is becoming increasingly common, and that is because we want students to be learning deeper, to be thinking deeper, to be analyzing deeper, to become much more thinking learners. So it's often called as disruptive technologies. Now we've got Web 3.0 and whatnot, concept mapping tools, educational gaming tools, VR, AR. There's a whole range out there that helps with learning with technology. That means the technology is not your teacher who's going to tell you what you need to do, but you are still in charge of your own learning, but you learn with the technology. All right, that's just an example that I have. I'm not going to show it to you, but that's just an example of type 2 technology. It helps students in terms of creative thinking, in terms of research work, in terms of communication, creating information, not just absorbing information or memorizing information, but type 2 applications enable you to create, to apply, to synthesize information. Okay, that is so much as teaching and learning, but how about professional development of teachers, of lecturers, of educators, of staff? It has been consistently, research has shown that for for the use of technology in teaching and learning to be successful, the teachers, the educators, the lecturers, the management personnel all have to be trained hands-on. It's not that, you know, they can just go in and use it. They need to be trained. That's why professional development is very important for all educators and policymakers, by the way, be it in the ministry, be it in the schools, be it in the universities, be it in organizations, tertiary institutions, etc. All right, so they need to be trained on how to use the tools, and then the soft skill of how do you use the tool to achieve your learning goals. All right, and then the last one is very important, attitudes and beliefs. A lot of educational technology initiatives, research has shown fail because the leaders, you know, could be leaders in the university, could be lecturers, could be teachers in the schools, could be school management teams, policy makers. They are not, there's a resistance, you know, some of them might be resistant to change, might be resistant to changing their teaching strategies because it means extra work, it means more time, means more effort to be invested. So when there is a resistance, it has been found that a lot of educational technology endeavors have failed, even though lots of money had been pumped in, hardware had been pumped in, but because attitudes were not right, so they did not bear the optimal fruits. So attitudes and beliefs are important. All right, so type 1 technology is very easy to introduce. Type 2 are a lot more harder because, and they need more staff professional development. All right, so these are the skills that, that educators need to have. I'm not going to run through that because it's not that very important. Okay, yes. The other question that often comes up is, if we want to train students, learners to become technology literate, which we need to because we are in the 21st century, and we need to equip them with the skills. So how best can we teach? Should we have standalone technology classes where the students are taught all these technology tools and skills? Or should the technology used be integrated into the specific subject domains? It could be in the school, math, science, or if it's in the university, engineering, accountancy, whatever. Should we have separate standalone technology literacy classes, or should they be integrated? Research clearly shows that integration is the way to go. That means instead of having a standalone computer class, you know, some schools, some universities have computer class. So you go there, you learn different software, you learn different tools, but that is not the way that research shows is the way to go in terms of moving forward with developing students' 21st century skills. It is better that technology is integrated within the subject domains, so that the curriculum, the subject domain goals drive the use of the technology, and they allow opportunities for students to explore, discover, and develop deeper understanding. Okay, again, I'm not going to show this example. I mean, I'm happy to share the slides with all of you if you want, so you can go through all these links. They are all good sample lessons that have been designed using technology and tools. Okay, gonna move a bit. Okay, I just wanted to show this again out of curiosity and interest for some of y'all who might not be aware. These are some of the latest findings from cognitive psychology, from neuroscience on how the human brain basically works. All right, I mean, this is again, it's work in progress. You know, it's amazing how the small little tiny brain that we have up in our heads could be so complex. We are still understanding how the brain processes information, but as of now, this is a basic understanding of how the brain works. So sensory memory of the brain is where, you know, you have your senses, you see something, you hear something, you observe something, you know, all of that is, you're feeding in information into your senses. So it comes into your brain picks, your senses pick up all of these inputs, by seeing, by hearing, by touching, whatnot. And then, it sends signals to the brain. So the brain has got two components which you must understand. One is called as a short-term or the working memory, and the other one is a long-term memory. So whatever that goes into your short-term memory means that after a certain short period of time, it gets erased. Okay, it doesn't stay there permanently. Whereas if it goes into the long-term memory, that means it stays permanently. So you'll be amazed. You can try this exercise. For example, you may have watched a movie like, say, 10 years ago, right? 10 years ago. And then the title of the movie, Terminator, whatever. And then somebody says, you meet somebody, say 10 years later, and they talk about, hey, we watched the movie 10 years ago, but you don't remember anything. You can't recall it. And then maybe, you go back and you watch the first few shots of the movie, the first few screens. And then very quickly, you can remember the rest of the story and what happened and what the ending was and all. I mean, why does that happen? That is because you watched the movie, it had gone into your long-term memory, but then you needed something which retrieval was not there. So when you watch the first few screenshots of the movie, it helped to bring about the retrieval. So you were then able to recall everything of the rest of the movie. But then there are other things where, somebody tells you, the other day I met somebody and he said, oh, I met you 5 years ago in Spain. I tried to recall, and he said, I did this with you, I did that with you. And I just couldn't recall. I couldn't recall this person at all. So why was that? So that's because whatever was my experiences, whatever was my interaction with the guy, all had gone into my working memory or short-term memory, and then it got erased. It's just like in the computer hard disk, I think they call it ROM and the RAM or something like that. You go into the short-term memory, gets erased because it's limited memory power. Long-term memory is far much more powerful, is far much more permanent. So what these developments in neuroscience and cognitive psychology for teaching and learning means is that in the past, when we used to do very rote, very superficial learning only happened at working memory. So you memorize something, you prepare for the exam, you go to the exam, you just throw out all that you can remember, you come out of the exam, you forget it. But now we know that that's not the real learning that we want. We want learning to go into long-term memory. That means we want the information to move from working memory to the long-term memory and not just stay in the long-term memory. We want the long-term memory information to be pulled out, to be retrieved and applied, right? So there's a shift in terms of understanding what teaching and learning now means is that we are moving to the right-hand side of this diagram. So how do we encode? How do we retrieve? All right, this is where a teacher or an educator or a lecturer plays an important role, because when you are designing a lesson, be it with technology or without technology, it doesn't matter. You have to try as much as possible to make sure that your lesson is planned with sufficient strategies to enable whatever that you're teaching can be encoded into long-term memory and can be retrieved so that they can apply it to solve real life problems. Okay. So what is working memory? 5 to 9 separate items can only be held. 5 to 20 seconds, it can remain there. If you want to improve your working memory, repetition, telling yourself, memorizing, keeping repeating, keeping writing down again and again might help to hold it a bit more longer in the working memory, but too much of it can cause cognitive overload. Because it's limited capacity. Long-term memory, which is now what cognitive psychology is trying to understand in greater depth, because this is where the human potential is embedded. Right? This is where the real secrets of human power lies in. All right, it takes more time and effort, but it is worth it because it's unlimited capacity. unlimited duration. That means you can hold it for the whole of your lifetime or perhaps beyond that. It's a combination of codes, mapping, it's like a concept mapping, where you have different ideas being put together. It's a mental model, schemata. This is how the information gets stored in long-term memory. That means chunks. I'm not going to go too much into mental model, but what basically mental model means is like concept mapping. You have different concepts or different ideas that are linked together with appropriate connections. That's the structure of a mental model. All right, so this is just to give you a little bit of a comparison. Right, so that's the process. So you will learn by receiving stimuli or information through your ears, through your by hands-on, by feeling, by touching, whatever. And then it goes into short-term memory. You rehearse it to keep it in the short-term memory, and then you need to bring it into long-term memory, and then you need to retrieve it from the long memory. All right, I want to just emphasize the first paragraph. The aim of instruction is to add knowledge, skills to long-term memory encoding. If not, learning has not happened. I repeat again, if not, learning has not happened. So what are the ways by which we can bring it to long-term memory, and what are the ways by which we can extract out of long-term memory? These are some of the strategies which I would like you to be aware about. All right, elaboration of subject matter. That means you allow students to explain. Instead of the teacher just explaining everything, you give opportunities for students to explain, to explain not just to the teacher, but to explain to other students, to explain to the class, all of that. All right, much more structured organization of content. All right, that means you've got proper structure, it's robust, it's coherent. And then you're not just only delivering content, all right, but you deliver it to a context. For example, I'm giving you a very basic example. Instead of just telling kids 1 + 1 is 2, we give them a context. Kids love chocolates. They love chocolates. So you give them one piece of chocolate, you give them a second piece of chocolate, you can ask them, hey, how many pieces of chocolate do you have? They look at it, they count, oh, they say we have 2 pieces of chocolate now. And then we say, oh, now if you give away one of it to your mommy, how many chocolates will you have left with? Oh, I will have only 1 chocolate left with. Can you see? Content to context. The content was mathematical addition and subtraction. But instead of just teaching them very dryly, hey, that's how we used to be taught in the past. We used to memorize 2 × 2 is 4. 4 × 4 is 8, multiplication table. I don't know whether you all remember. I did it like that. That's how I learned my maths. But that's not relating to context. You need to give some real world useful context. Then the learners will see that this is useful content. When the brain picks up that this is useful content for me, then it will embed it in the long-term memory. Otherwise, the brain is, the short-term memory is limited. It will say, oh, this is not necessary for me, it's useless, so throw it away. So that's what you need to relate content to context. Opportunities for reflection, which is why nowadays you've got reflection journals. You ask learners to keep diaries. What have they learned? What can they apply from what they have learned? Different questions can be asked, but basically opportunities for them to reflect on what they had learned. When they can do that, it goes again directly into long-term memory. Okay, relating previous knowledge. As I told you, mental model is like a network. So the brain needs to make linkages or connections. So when you teach a new piece of information, you must endeavor to make sure that it is connected to the older pieces of information that the students already have. Which is why, for example, when I go to my class, I usually recap what was learned in the previous classes, because when they recall what they have learned previously, the new information goes into the brain. The brain can make a connection. When the brain makes a connection between the new and the old piece of information, it goes into the long-term memory. All right, asking students experiences. For example, if you're teaching about electric circuits, ask about the house is full of electric circuits. What is their experiences? Some of them can get electric shocks. What does that mean? Why is it that some objects sink? Why is it that some objects float? Have you seen that if you're talking about density, for example, teaching the students about density, you can say, hey, look, the styrofoam floats in water, but when I put a steel, it's sinking. Why do you think so? This is something everyday experiences. So you need to bring that, then it will go into long-term memory, unfamiliar terms. Lots of examples, illustrations, analogies based upon student experiences is also good. All right, and then using multiple modes of representation. You use text, you use pictures, you use audio, you use video, different multimodal representations. So those are the strategies to encode into the long-term memory. Now we need to retrieve from long-term memory. How do we do that? You give opportunities for learners to problem solve, real world application, problem solving, cases, giving cases, analysis, all of these help. All right, so I'm just going to quickly run through this because it's not, I've already covered this. On to the last part. So those were just the, I just showed you how the brain processes information. So that could be from technology, it could be, the normal modes of teaching and learning, but whatever ways in which you use, it's important to understand how the brain works. Nowadays, we talk about brain-based learning, cognitive learning, etc., because we now better understand the brain than, say, 20 years ago. And we know that the brain is the center of learning and teaching. So we need to integrate whatever we have understood of the brain in terms of teaching and learning processes. But coming back again to technology, educational technology, this is a great model of educational technology that I like. It's by Seals and Ritchie. So you start off with you can start off anywhere. It's a cycle. But usually you start out with the design where you look at what you're teaching, who your learners are, goals, etc. Then you develop your lesson, you develop your program, you develop your course, utilization. Then you look at which technologies can I use, which media can I use, which tools can I use. Then you teach it, and then you manage the process because, sometimes some hiccups might be there. You need to manage it, time. You need to manage time, resources. Can all my students access this technology? How do I do it? Do I do it in class? Can they do it from home? You need to manage that process. And then very important is you need to evaluate. That means after your thing is done, you need to evaluate whether was the teaching successful? Did I use the right form of technology? Did I use too much of technology? Maybe I should reduce the amount of reliance on technology. Or was it that it's such a grand success, I can repeat this for my other lessons? You need to evaluate. You need to get feedback from learners. You need to observe and take notes. You need to look at students' learning progress, in their evaluation tests. How well are they doing it? And then you repeat the cycle from wherever that you need to. It's a cyclic one. All right, this is another model that I like, ADDIE model. Again, it's for use of technology, but it's basically the same steps. I'm just going to skip this because, yeah, this is just about the model, which we don't have to go in at this point of time. I want to open it more towards, all right, we spoke about this. Planning, coordination, evaluation, as I say, is the process for determining how well your teaching was, and then looking at different forms of evaluation. All right, so just wanted to keep it as such because I wanted to give some time for any question and answer rather than me talking too much. All right, thank you. That's all I have.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Kumar. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you all have enjoyed the wonderful sharing by Dr. Kumar. And now we have come to the question and answer session. So Dr. Kumar will answer the questions that were sent to us during the session. So the first question is from Mr. Ridwan Mat. Okay, the question is, could you share with me the actual issue behind the educational technologies intention or adoption? We have the policy, support from the ministry, the availability of the technologies, and fast network connection. Even some studies prove that the demographic profile of the educator is not the major concern of this issue. Do you agree with my point that the educator's characteristics or their acceptance, personality and competencies level are the prime things influencing them to adopt? Or perhaps you have other perspectives to share? Thank you. So that's the first question, Dr. Kumar.
Yeah, so you're talking about, I mean, if I can, I think I did touch on this topic during my presentation, is that you're talking about educators' profile and expertise. So as I mentioned, one of the factors that research has consistently shown is the success of an educational technology endeavor is not the hardware. Hardware is very easy to implement, like you said, fast bandwidth and lines and fiber and whatnot. Could be easily be implemented even in poorer countries with United Nations and all supporting. They can easily inundate, but it has been shown that what really matters is the soft aspects of it, which is teachers, educators' levels of expertise, attitudes and beliefs. Attitudes and beliefs is so important, as I mentioned during my presentation. If the teacher is not willing, if the teacher sees this as a burden, if the teacher sees that, I can teach, I've been teaching it, with my, in my class, my maths last 30 years like this. If that's the teacher's attitude, you can have the more sophisticated technology infrastructure in the school, in the university, in the institution, but it means nothing. Actually, it's on the reverse. It's actually a wastage of resources, of precious money and taxpayers' money and all of that. So, I mean, I'm just going to give you an example. I mean, I'm sharing the Singapore context because it's something worth sharing. I mean, and that's also because I used to be involved in the policy making and in the ministry, So we have had like 4 master plans in using ICT in education. So the first 2 master plans were basically looking at infrastructure for the schools, because obviously, the first thing is to install the infrastructure and all hardware. And then the third and the 4th master plans basically looked at teachers' professional development and students' literacy skills development. So teachers, educators' professional development, buying in teachers, changing teachers' attitudes, educators knowing, better understanding what all of that is very important. Understanding who your educators are, what is their mindset, training them, giving them the opportunities, rewarding them for the opportunities if they take that jump in embracing. All of that is definitely very important. Otherwise, you will have $1 million expensive white elephant staying in your school, in your institution, and nobody's going to use it. I hope that
yes, yeah, very interesting. I totally agree with what you have said just now. So let's go on with the second question from Miss Joanna Bunga. She says, hi doctor, soft skills integration is just as important in every lesson. How do we include soft skills with technological teaching and learning? Thank you.
The best way to do, there are a couple of ways that you can approach it. One could be that you get outside experts, because if you're for example, let's say you're an educator, you're a school teacher, for staff professional development, as we all know, one of the most effective ways is to bring in experts in the field to come in and actually train you up, to have sharing sessions, to have which is basically outside expertise. So people coming in, doing workshops, staff professional development seminars. For example, I might be coming in and training up your pool of educators with my series of workshops as an outsider, as an outside, expert evaluator. That is one way. I've seen different ways that this has been done. The other way is that the school management takes a very active role in it. So what they do is that within the school, they have internal staff professional development setups. So, there might be some teachers who are very skilled in the use of technologies and they are doing it very well with their students. So you encourage, you reward those teachers. You ask them to come forward and do sharing with the other teachers, basically teacher champions, you call it as. So these are expert teachers who can then share within the school from a cluster of schools. So you don't bring a third person outside, but within. And then the third way is to have lots of sharing sessions where teachers get together, voice their concerns, because using technology, there's going to be a lot of challenges, there's going to be a lot of shortcomings, which needs to be addressed. So you need to make teachers feel comfortable. You don't want to make them. A lot of resistance comes because teachers think this is too much of work, I can't do it. So that's where it's all about hand holding, giving the support. You need to have support systems in the school, in the institution, to support. And so it's multifold. It comes from different angles. The teacher, a very important role is played by the school or the educational leadership team. They have to be seen to be nurturing, supportive, in leading the efforts. Yeah. So these are some of the ways by which you can go about with staff professional development as far as technology integration is concerned.
Okay. On to our next question from Ellen. We have different types of students with different types of learning. How do we cater for that in terms of delivering lectures and conducting tutorials? Yeah.
You see, this is where technology can play a powerful role, because you have got in a class, for example, in a normal school, in a class, 30 to 40 students, let's say. It's very hard for you to customize your teaching to suit every student. It's next to impossible. Because when you teach to 30 students in a class, or in a lecture theatre of 100 students, you can't, you teach it one way, and some of them might learn it, a lot of them might not. This is where technology plays a role, because you can actually have, using a variety of strategies, a variety of tools, you can customize. So you can have a certain resources, tools for certain groups of students whom you think maybe learn in a certain way. Some students like to learn it in fun ways. So, for them, you might have a lesson, you bring them to the computer lab and you say, okay, group one, you will be learning using online gaming tools. There are lots of them there. Some of them prefer to learn it by problem solving. So there are problem solving tools out there. So you may break up that group and say, okay, you guys either work in group or individually on problem solving tools. Someone else might prefer just a YouTube video based learning. So that same topic, for them, you might do that. The other thing you can do is that some students may be very well versed in that topic in science. Some of the students are weaker. So you can group the weaker students and give them more resources using technology, whereas for the other students, you could ask them to do something else. So in fact, the very notion that you can customize your teaching and learning becomes a lot more easier through the use of technological tools.
All right. All right, thank you, Dr. Kumar. Due to time constraint, we are going to maybe select two more questions, read to you two more questions. So the next one is from Mr. Izzat Rahim. Izzat says, hi, Dr. Kumar, could you please explain a little bit on ethics in using technology in education, i.e. original content, plagiarism, and
Okay. So you're coming from that aspect of ethics. I was looking at ethics in terms of parity, in terms of equality of access to the tools, but you're talking about plagiarism and all of that. So that becomes another big problem when we are using online learning tools, because plagiarism becomes very rampant. So the first thing is that you need to teach students, learners, to evaluate the information you find in websites. Are they authentic? You know, I'm not going to get into the details of that. There are technology literacy lessons out there that actually teach students to how do you look. For example, you read a website. How do you know whether the content is true? Because there's nobody who regulates the internet, nobody who checks the veracity of the information in the internet. A lot of it could be rumors, a lot of it could be non-factual. So what are the strategies you can teach students so that when they look at an information in a website, they know that, oh, it's coming from authority? So there's some ways of looking at it. You teach students to look at who the author is. You know, if the author is a well-known established professor in a university, you know that, you know, he's not going to write rubbish. He's going to write factual scientific stuff. What else? Is the website being sponsored, approved, supported by established organizations? Then you know generally the information that goes in there should be accurate. So that is one aspect of ethics in that you teach the students to actually validate whether the information they are getting from the website, from the internet is valid, is accurate. That is one aspect of it. The other aspect of ethics that you talk about, plagiarism, is something very rampant. I mean, you know, I face it here in the university with my undergrad. I face it with my postgrad students. A lot of people just copy and paste. Obviously, we now have plagiarism tools in place. Most universities have it. So, and nowadays, like for example, at University of Auckland, we are mandated. I mean, the students are mandated to run it through our plagiarism tools, and then give us the stats in the assignment. So that is one way of rooting out the problem, because anybody, any student, young and old, I'm telling you, is prone to plagiarize information and pass it off as their own. So every day, more and more sophisticated plagiarism detection tools are coming on board. And I know for a fact that, because we are using one, it really is very effective. So you can pick out those students, because that is part of ethics. You know, a student who works hard, you know, writes on his or her own self, and then produces an input, gets marked less than someone else who copies someone else's work and then passes it off as his own. It's not, I mean, that's not ethical. So we need to root out plagiarism, and plagiarism detection tools are important in that sense. So if you are giving a web-based assignment, it is important that either you ask the students to run it through or you run it through. It's quite easy at a very basic level, and find out what is the level of plagiarism. And you need to be, and part of the ethics is to, obviously, at the beginning of any course, we need to do that, specify very clearly what plagiarism means. In fact, in our university, all students, before they get enrolled in undergrad, have to go through now a course on plagiarism, on honesty in academic learning. It's called, I think, academic integrity. Yes. So you go through that, where they actually tell you what academic integrity means, plagiarism means, what are the implications, and then we run them through the tools. I mean, you'll be surprised, you know, there have been many cases internationally in universities where people have done PhDs. You're not talking about school students, you're not talking about undergrads, you know, 20-year-olds, you're talking about grown-up adults who are doing their PhD, and when they ran their thesis through the plagiarism detection tool, like 70%, and you know, a PhD, most of it has to be original. That's what, you know, that's a PhD is about, it's about originality. If 70 to 80% of your content has been copied, that means that, you know, there's a whole big question over, you know, integrity, ethics, and all of that. So these are some of the issues. I mean, ethics is a very complicated topic, not just in terms of technology, but, you know, even in normal everyday life, in teaching and learning, ethics is a complicated, is a vexing topic. But thankfully, when it's to do with anything nowadays with plagiarism detection tools, and they're becoming very sophisticated, you can pretty much pick up, and students do get quite are pretty much aware that, you know, they can be caught, and if they are caught, then the penalty can be quite severe. So, so that's just one of those things.
Okay. Dr. Kumar, here's the last question from Mr. Oswald Timothy Edward. Oswald is asking, hi doctor, do you mind sharing your thoughts on students with special needs? And how, special needs, that's why this is a very interesting one. How could they rely on technology to communicate and access course materials?
Definitely.
So if you could, briefly answer this.
Okay,
Sure.
obviously, one of the biggest challenges is, again, special needs is not something which is very simply defined. As we know, it's a very broad continuum. There can be people with dyslexia to a lot of things. It's a range. It's a very broad range. It's not people are at different types of disabilities, different levels of disabilities. First and foremost, let me clarify that I'm not a special needs expert. So whatever I'm saying is from my very layman understanding of what it means. But for example, I have come across a lot of tools, in the latest, I think Microsoft 360 degree, is that 360? I don't know, whatever you call it. The latest range of tools Microsoft has got for PowerPoint, for Word, they have got lots of embedded features for students with learning disabilities. In fact, I'm trying to working with another colleague to write up a research grant to see how we can trial it. There are lots of tools out there with people for dyslexia, for different learning disabilities in different subjects. So those tools can, and I think they do help. As I said, I'm not an expert in special needs, so I think it's the same as with anything else in class where we are trying to use technology to customize teaching and learning. I mean, one of the key powerful enablers of technology is that even in a class of 30 normal students, mainstream students better, some students will learn not so well, some students will learn certain ways better, some students will not learn certain ways better, some students are better at certain subjects. So it's a diverse range, and we basically have to understand what is that range of needs of our learners, and then we can use the affordances of technologies to cater to the different groups. And I would think the same logic applies in special needs as well, because they are not different from us. It's just that some of them have got certain learning disabilities. And so there are an increasing range of tools, which I unfortunately am not very familiar with. And some of them are using latest technologies like AR, VR to help students with learning disabilities. And again, they help to bridge that gap. And I think that's one of the most important roles or contributions of technologies to bridge the gap. I call it as parity in education. That means the goal of education is that no matter where you are, no matter how rich or poor you are, no matter how smart or not so smart you are, education, the role of education, the noble aims of education, which I think has been from day one, is that you try and you reach out to all your different learners and try them to bring on par, using different strategies, using different tools, using different approaches. But the goal is that as much as possible within human limitations, you try and allow the opportunities for learning to be as equitable, to be as equal, to be as level as possible.
Right, thank you, Dr. Kumar, for your answer. So there are actually tons of questions coming in.
So before I just forget, I can see a lot of questions popping up in the chat. Unfortunately, time is a bit of a constraint. I'm quite happy if you want to have. I mean, I'm pretty surprised. I shouldn't say surprised. That's not the right word. I'm pleasantly shocked that the questions that have been asked have really been very sharp, have been very relevant. I mean, it's very thought-provoking questions, by the way. They are really good questions. So if an opportunity comes another time, maybe instead of a presentation, I will be happy just to take a question and answer session. But my email is there. You can see. Feel free to drop me any questions that you might have. Some of y'all have asked me for my slides. Again, if you can, either somebody, one of y'all just gather together all the email addresses and then you email it to me. I can send the slides over, or if you have any pertinent questions, you're more than welcome to drop an email. I'll be happy to respond by email, or if you want to have a chat with me on Zoom or whatever, again, I'm very happy to do so, but just take note of my email.
Right. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We are all very appreciative of that gesture, Dr. Kumar. It's going to benefit a lot of teachers and educators listening today. Before we end, I would like to apologize to people who have given questions. We really
I just have to, yeah. I just noticed something, sorry. Okay. Please, the email, this is the updated one because we changed the email sub. So it's not kumar.laxman, but it's k.laxman. Can I just point out to everybody that this is the updated one? Thank God for that.
Yes, everyone, please take note of the changes, yeah? Thank you so much. So again, I would like to apologize to everyone for those who have sent in their questions. Very, very good questions. And, you know, since we have our Dr. Laxman's email, you can actually write to him personally, yeah, and have a discussion with him. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the session. We would like to say thank you again to Dr. Kumar for sharing with us the best practices on technologies that can be adopted in teaching and learning during these times of pandemic. It is indeed a pleasure to have you with us, Dr. Kumar. And with that, this marks the end of the talk. I will hand over the session to Dr. Rafidah. Over to you, Dr. Rafidah.
Okay, thank you, Dzeelfa. Thank you so much once again to Dr. Kumar for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. Indeed, it is an eye-opening for all of us here. And thank you to everyone. We appreciate your willingness to be with us today throughout the session. And thank you so much for joining us and for all the questions, interesting questions raised to Dr. Kumar today. Before I end the session, just one thing to remind everybody. I would like to remind all participants to fill in the feedback form or scan the QR code for the e-certificate and training hours. Okay, you may get the link from our WebEx and also in the comment section in our FB Live. Okay, please be informed that the e-certificate will be automatically generated once you have filled up your attendance. Okay, be there any problem to get the e-certificate, please do not hesitate to contact our secretariat via email or WhatsApp. Till we meet again, thank you so much. Assalamualaikum and good day, everyone. Thank you.
See you then. Bye.